this is the first time a president has been charged with a crime, an historical moment. Dr. Laura Smith is a presidential historian. Laura, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me on.
Look, what's the closest any other president has come to criminal action before?
Well, Ulysses S. Grant in 1872 was arrested for driving his horse-drawn carriage, speeding along in Washington.
Speeding, yeah.
But it certainly didn't rise to this level and was dropped. So I think really the closest comparison is Richard Nixon. Certainly, he resigned from office to escape prosecution, to escape impeachment, to escape being actually removed from office, and tried to resurrect his legacy throughout his remaining days, but never escaped obviously Watergate, even though obviously his successor Gerald Ford pardoned him.
And the guy who was done for speeding the horse, he actually for speeding on a horse, they didn't go through with it in the end, did they?
No, I mean, Washington, if you can imagine after the Civil War, I mean, the Capitol building was still being built in the Civil War, so it looked physically very different than it does today. The Willard Hotel, which is where the January 6th planning took place, you may be familiar with it. That was actually there during the Civil War. That's a very historic hotel building. So it's a very interesting comparison that Trump's people used it when it was a sort of symbol for democracy during the Civil War in the Union. So there are these comparisons with the Washington landscape, but certainly it was very different those days in terms of what presidents, how they were sort of charged or not charged in this respect.
Help us what the rules say then about prosecuting a presidential candidate.
Well, prosecuting a presidential candidate, obviously, this is a first, like you've been saying, it's unprecedented. And I think it really gets to answering these questions that have been lingering, not just for America, but for the world. This idea that it's been 50 years since last summer, since Watergate happened. And in those past 50 years, we've had 3 presidents face impeachment, one, obviously, Donald Trump twice. And yet none removed from office. Richard Nixon resigned, obviously, to avoid being removed from office. Bill Clinton, his being impeached by the House for perjuring himself was really seen. It upped his popularity. The American voters did not like it. They thought that Newt Gingrich and the Republicans had gone too far. It had become hyper-partisan. And the fact that Donald Trump was impeached twice, you had the Republican side saying this is too partisan. And we don't see anymore any party sort of looking at impeachment the way that perhaps the founders intended, which was this idea of the very vague high crimes and misdemeanors, the idea that you put politics to one side and the Senate in particular acts as a jury, impartial, in terms of deciding whether a president has risen to that threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. So the big question when Donald Trump, being unprecedented in the sense of being impeached twice and yet faced no consequences because he wasn't convicted, he wasn't removed, and running again for the presidency, it raised this question of, has impeachment become meaningless? Has it just become a partisan tool? And what we see now is the fact that actually, justice is blind, and it doesn't matter how much power you have or how many connections you have, or if you were an ex-president, you are still held to account.
Well, are you going to be held to account, though? We've seen that he's been arraigned. Maybe you should talk us through the process in your country, Laura, because people listening to this programme tonight, they're going to hear a lot about the fact that a grand jury decided this. We don't have that process in this country. Talk us through how that happens.
Right. So a grand jury of your peers, so it's countrymen and women who have come together and who have listened behind closed doors to decide whether it has reached this threshold of being something that should be indicted. They have apparently come off with 30 different counts. We don't know the details yet, but that's certainly a significant number. There's been talk as to that they were particularly swayed by a witness that was there for, half an hour last week on Thursday, I think it was. We don't know who that witness was yet. We certainly know that Michael Cohen, Trump's former fixer lawyer, and who served jail time as well, has been giving evidence, giving testimony. So that's really how you get there. This idea of being, impartial. These people with the jury serves.
And what are they doing? Are they assessing whether there's a likely chance of a successful prosecution? Is that the threshold to be arraigned?
Yes, so I should clarify that I am half British, half Canadian, so it's not quite my country and my legal system, but absolutely, this is the threshold that they're trying to reach. Is this something that should go to trial? That's the question. Is this something that should be heard in a court of law? Could potentially be prosecuted? That is the ultimate question. So it is holding people to account, and I think it does matter, to go back to your original question, in the sense that I've talked about how impeachment has become more frequent in the past 50 years, but Trump is never going to escape the fact that he has made history by being the first ex-president to be indicted. And whatever the outcome of this particular case, and he's certainly facing as well more serious prosecution and criminal questions that could come to a head too. So whatever the outcome, this is still a stain on his legacy. And I think you could see, as you were just talking about, the GOP and his base. I find the GOP rallying around him in particular very interesting. People who Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, hasn't declared yet, but most people are speculating that he could run in 2024, and he would be quite popular. Certainly, Floridians think so. And the fact that even he is coming out and defending Trump, you see this rallying, means that you can see the Republican Party is still the Trump party. So I think it does put them in a really interesting, potentially very awkward position in terms of timing. As you were just talking about Super Tuesday in February next year, when it comes to the primaries, how is this going to impact?
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Laura Smith, really, really interesting. Ari,